My tech genius brother designed our smart house. A network reset just revealed he's helping my husband steal my money while covering up his affair. The house didn't just feel alive, it felt like it was judging me. It was an architectural masterpiece of glass, black steel, and automated perfection, nestled deep in the hills of Seattle. My younger brother Leo was a Silicon Valley prodigy who had custom-built the entire smart home operating system as a wedding gift to my husband, David, and me. Every light, every lock, every temperature gauge was controlled by an advanced AI network Leo affectionately named the Sentinel. "You're living in the future, Maya," Leo had bragged to me 3 years ago, flashing that cocky, boyish grin that made investors throw millions at him. "Nobody gets in, nobody gets out, and your privacy is ironclad. I've made you the master admin." I had trusted him blindly. Why wouldn't I? Leo was my only remaining blood relative after our parents passed, and David was the charming, fiercely attentive husband I had built a multi-million-dollar digital marketing agency with. We were a team, or so I thought. The first crack in my perfect reality appeared on a Tuesday evening. David was supposedly in Chicago for a 4-day corporate merger conference. The house was dead quiet, save for the ambient hum of the smart refrigerator. I was sitting at the kitchen island, going over the agency's quarterly distributions, when the lights suddenly flickered. A smooth, digital voice echoed from the ceiling speakers. "System anomaly detected. Network routing error in Sector 4. Initiating hard factory reset." The house plunged into darkness for 5 seconds before the backup generators kicked in, bathing the kitchen in a dim, amber emergency glow. My phone buzzed aggressively. The custom smart home app Leo had coded for me was flashing a bright red warning prompt: "Critical firmware mismatch. Reverting to base administrative root directory. Please log in using primary hardware key." I frowned, pulling up my laptop. I didn't know much about coding, but I knew my basic master password. Because the system had fully reset to its raw, unskinned factory settings, the sleek, user-friendly interface Leo had built was gone. Instead, I was looking at a raw, unedited system log, the digital skeleton of the house. As I scrolled through the newly unmasked system directories, trying to find the toggle to turn the kitchen lights back on, my eyes caught a folder labeled "Local IP Bridge Hidden Curiosity Flared." I clicked it. The directory didn't contain smart home data. It contained video files. Millions of gigabytes of encrypted data, originating not from my house, but being mirrored directly from a remote network address. I bypassed the unencrypted secondary security wall, a flaw left open by the factory reset, and clicked the most recent video file, dated just 2 hours ago. The video feed was crystal clear, high-definition security footage. But it wasn't my house. It was Leo's luxury downtown penthouse. On the screen, sitting on Leo's expensive Italian leather sofa, was my husband David. He wasn't in Chicago. He was wearing a plush bathrobe, sipping a glass of scotch. A moment later, a woman walked into the frame. It was Chloe, Leo's gorgeous 24-year-old wife. She climbed onto David's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck, and kissed him with a passionate, practiced familiarity that proved this wasn't the first time. My breath caught in my throat. The room spun. But before I could even process the visceral sting of my husband sleeping with my sister-in-law, the audio feed crackled to life. A third person entered the frame carrying a laptop. It was my brother Leo. He didn't look angry. He didn't look surprised. He walked right past his wife kissing my husband, slapped David on the shoulder, and turned the laptop screen toward him. The secondary offshore shell company is fully integrated into Maya's agency payroll accounts. Leo's voice bounced off my kitchen walls, cold and clinical. By the time she realizes the capital has been reallocated to the trust fund, the divorce paperwork will be filed, the money will be legally untouchable, and she won't be able to claim a single dime. "You just keep her distracted for another 2 weeks, David." David smiled, pulling Chloe closer to his side. "Don't worry, Leo. She thinks I'm pitching to investors in Chicago. She has no idea the house she's sitting in is actually a cage." I sat in the amber glow of my smart house, staring at the screen, the silence around me suddenly feeling weaponized. My husband, my brother, my sister-in-law. They weren't just betraying my marriage, they were systematically erasing my entire existence. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The betrayal was so massive, so multi-layered, that it bypassed my emotional receptors entirely and triggered a primitive, icy survival instinct. I closed the laptop screen slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. They thought I was stupid. They thought because I ran the creative side of the business while David handled the finances and Leo handled the tech, I was blind to the world they operated in. But you don't build a $20 million agency by being an idiot. I looked up at the tiny black dome of the smart camera nestled in the corner of the kitchen ceiling. The lens blue light was blinking again. The factory reset was over, and Leo's custom software was coming back online. He would know within minutes that a master override had occurred. I needed to act fast. I grabbed my car keys and my purse, slipping my personal laptop into my tote bag. I needed to get out of the house, find a secure, unmonitored location, and figure out how much of my life they had already stolen. As I stepped toward the front door, the heavy, smart lock clicked loudly. A solid red bar illuminated across the steel handle. "Security lockdown initiated," the digital voice purred from the walls. "Unusual administrative activity detected. External access restricted until primary developer verification." Leo had locked me in. From his penthouse downtown, he had realized the system reset had exposed something, and he was taking control. Panic flared, hot and sharp, but I forced it down. I walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the driveway. They were reinforced, impact-resistant water-resistant smart glass. I couldn't break them. The house was literally a luxury prison. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Leo's face, smiling alongside me at a Thanksgiving dinner. I took a deep breath, smoothing my voice until it sounded completely normal, and answered. "Hey Leo, the house just did a weird reset. The lights went out and the front door is locked. What's going on?" A pause on the other end. I could hear the faint ambient sound of Leo's penthouse music in the background, the same music from the video. "Hey sis, yeah, sorry about that. I just pushed a massive firmware update to the Sentinel network, and it looks like it triggered a false security protocol. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, leaning against the kitchen island, keeping my eyes locked on the ceiling camera. "I was actually just about to head out to meet a client for a late dinner. Can you override the lock from your end?" Give me about 10 minutes, Leo said, his voice entirely too relaxed, too practiced. "The server patch is still compiling. Just sit tight, pour a glass of wine, and I'll have you out in a jiffy. Don't touch the router or the local admin console, okay? It might corrupt the data. Translation, don't look at the hidden video logs." "Sure thing, Leo. Thanks," I said, hanging up. 10 minutes? That's all the time I had before Leo went into the system logs, saw exactly which directory I had accessed, and realized I knew everything. Once he knew I was aware of the affair and the embezzlement, they would accelerate their timeline, freeze my bank accounts completely, and lock me out of my own company before sunrise. I ran down to the basement, where the main fiber-optic breaker box for the house was located. It was protected by a heavy steel door with a biometric fingerprint scanner. Leo's fingerprint was registered, David's was registered, and mine was too. I pressed my thumb against the glass. "Access denied," the machine beeped. Leo had already stripped my biometric clearance. Rage, cold and blinding, washed over me. I looked around the concrete basement room. In the corner sat a heavy industrial emergency fire axe, mounted inside a red glass case. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a nearby metal stool, smashed the glass case, and pulled the axe free. I walked up to the main power conduits running from the wall into the smart server rack, the beating heart of Leo's precious Sentinel. "Let's see your firmware update handle this," I muttered. I swung the axe with every ounce of strength I had, burying the sharp steel blade directly into the thick bundle of fiber-optic cables and electrical mains. A massive blue spark exploded from the wall, throwing me backward onto the concrete floor. The high-pitched whine of the servers died instantly. The house plunged into a deep, heavy, absolute darkness. No backup generators, no smart locks, no cameras. I stood up, coughing through the faint smell of ozone, and walked back up the stairs. I pushed against the front door. Without electrical power holding the magnetic plates together, the smart lock failed safely. The heavy steel door swung wide open into the cool, midnight air. I was out of the cage. Now it was time to hunt. I drove my car into the underground parking garage of a 24-hour luxury hotel downtown, completely bypassing my own neighborhood. I paid cash for a room on the 14th floor, refusing to use our shared credit cards, which I knew David or Leo could track within seconds. Once inside the sterile safety of the hotel room, I opened my personal laptop and connected to a secure public VPN. My hands were shaking, but my mind was laser-focused. I needed to see the damage. I logged into my private portal for Vance Digital Marketing, the agency I'd spent 10 years building from a two-person operation in a studio apartment into a premier regional firm. David had joined 5 years ago as the chief financial officer, a move I had celebrated at the time as the perfect merging of our lives. I opened the back-end accounting software, using an old legacy administrative login I had created years ago and never deleted. David thought he had restricted my corporate access to just the creative design directories, but he had forgotten about the original root account. What I saw made my stomach drop. Over the past 6 months, millions of dollars had been systematically siphoned out of our operational reserves. The transactions were disguised as vendor payments to a company called Apex Tech Solutions, LLC. I did a quick search on the state's corporate registry for Apex Tech Solutions. The registered agent? Leo Vance, my brother. They were bleeding my company dry, transferring my hard-earned capital into a shell corporation controlled by Leo. And based on the video conversation I had witnessed tonight, that money was being funneled directly into an offshore trust account that would be legally shielded from me during the divorce proceedings they were planning to hit me within 2 weeks. They were going to leave me broke, humiliated, and cast out of my own company, while David and Chloe ran off into the sunset with my fortune, funded by my own brother's technical genius. A soft knock on the hotel room door made me jump. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. Nobody knew I was here. I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't checked in under my real name. I walked slowly to the door, peering through the peephole. Standing in the hallway was an older man wearing a sharp tweed jacket, holding a leather briefcase. It was Arthur Pendleton, my father's old corporate attorney and a man who had known Leo and me since we were children. He looked anxious, his eyes darting down the corridor. I unlocked the door, opening it just a crack. "Arthur, how on earth did you find me?" Arthur slipped into the room quickly, closing the door behind him and locking it. He let out a long sigh, setting his briefcase on the bed. "I didn't find you through Leo's network, Maya, if that's what you're worried about. I've been monitoring your agency's filings for weeks. When I saw your master admin profile access the legacy system tonight, followed by a complete blackout of your home network, I knew the bomb had finally dropped." I stared at him, confused. "You knew? You knew what they were doing?" "I didn't know about the affair, Maya," Arthur said gently, his eyes filled with profound regret. "But I knew about the money. Your father left a contingency clause in his estate capsule before he passed. trust. He knew Leo had a streak of dangerous, reckless ambition. He made me the independent trustee of a secondary family fund, with strict instructions to monitor any major financial overlaps between you and your brother. Arthur, they've taken almost $4 million, I said, my voice cracking for the first time. It's gone. It's in an offshore account. It's not gone yet, Arthur said, opening his briefcase and pulling out a thick stack of financial documents. Leo is a brilliant coder, but he's an amateur accountant. He routed the money through a local state bank before sending it overseas, because the funds originated from an agency where you hold a 51% majority ownership stake. David didn't have the legal authority to sign off on those transfers without your explicit, written consent. He forged my signature? Exactly, Arthur nodded grimly. It's not just a divorce matter anymore, Maya. It's grand larceny, bank fraud, and corporate embezzlement. But if you go to the police right now, Leo's legal team will tie this up in discovery for years, and David will flee the jurisdiction with whatever cash he can grab. We need to catch them in the act of finalizing the transfer. We need to let them think they've won, right up until the moment the trap springs shut. I looked at the documents, then looked at my reflection in the dark hotel window. The sorrow was completely gone, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. They want to play a game of chess in the dark, I whispered. Let's turn the lights on. The next morning, I drove back to my dark, powerless mansion. I needed to play my part. I called Leo from the driveway, putting on my best performance of an overwhelmed, slightly tech-illiterate sister. Leo, I am so incredibly sorry, I wailed into the phone, letting my voice shake with artificial panic. I had a massive panic attack last night when the security system locked me in. I thought someone was trying to break in, and I went down to the basement with an axe. I think I completely destroyed the server rack. The whole house is dead. A long, heavy silence stretched over the line. I could almost hear Leo's brain calculating the damage, balancing his anger against his need to keep me unsuspecting. You hit the server with an axe, Maya? Leo asked, his voice tight, vibrating with a suppressed rage that made me smile inside. I was terrified, Leo. You know how claustrophobic I get, I cried. Please tell me you can fix it. David is coming back from Chicago tomorrow, and if he sees the house like this, he's going to think I've lost my mind. Yeah, it's fine, sis, Leo said, forcing a calm tone that sounded entirely unnatural. It's just hardware. I can have a new server rack delivered and installed by this afternoon. Just stay out of the basement, okay? Let my team handle it. Thank you. Leo, you're the best brother in the world, I said, hanging up. By 2:00 p.m., Leo's private tech team had completely replaced the server rack, running new fiber-optic lines and restoring power to the house. The Sentinel was back online, its little blue camera eyes watching me once again, and at 5:00 p.m., David arrived home early from his Chicago trip. He walked through the front door, looking tanned, relaxed, and utterly disposable. He dropped his designer luggage on the floor and rushed over to me, wrapping his arms around me in a warm, suffocating embrace. Oh my God, honey. Leo told me what happened? David murmured into my hair, his voice dripping with artificial sympathy. Are you okay? He said you had a rough night with the smart system. I'm much better now that you're home, I said, burying my face in his shoulder so he couldn't see the absolute disgust in my eyes. How was the merger conference? Exhausting, David sighed, rubbing his temples beautifully. Lots of late-night negotiations, lots of numbers, but I think we're about to secure a massive windfall for the agency. In fact, Leo and I need to do a final review of the corporate accounts tonight at his penthouse. Just some technical legal stuff before the funds clear. The final transfer, I realized. Tonight was the night they were going to move the siphoned millions from the local state bank into the offshore trust. Of course, darling, I said, patting his cheek. You go handle the business. I think I'm just going to have a quiet night here. Maybe take a long bath and read a book. That sounds perfect, sweetie. David smiled, kissing my forehead. He had no idea it was the last time his lips would ever touch my skin. As soon as David left the house an hour later, I went down to the basement. I didn't need an axe this time. Arthur Pendleton had provided me with a specialized hardware key, a clean, unmonitored USB drive containing a localized data intercept script written by an independent cybersecurity firm he retained. Plugged the drive into the primary diagnostic port of the new server. Rack, if Leo can mirror his penthouse, cameras to my house, I whispered to myself, watching the terminal lines fly across my laptop screen. Then I can mirror his entire network right back to me. The screen flashed green. The bridge was established. I didn't just have access to the video feeds in Leo's penthouse anymore. I had a live real-time keylogger running on his private administration laptop. Every stroke of his keyboard, every password he typed, every banking authorization code he generated tonight would be mirrored directly to my screen and directly to Arthur Pendleton, who was currently sitting inside a parked van outside Leo's downtown high-rise alongside two field agents from the State Financial Crimes Division. They thought they had built a digital cage around me, but they had forgotten the golden rule of technology. The person who controls the physical infrastructure always wins the war. At 9:00 p.m., the trap was fully sprung. Through the mirrored network bridge, I watched the live video feed of Leo's penthouse on my laptop screen. David was there, sitting at the glass dining table alongside Leo. Chloe was lounging on the adjacent sofa, casually scrolling through her phone, occasionally tossing a flirtatious glance at my husband right in front of her own husband. The sheer casualness of their depravity was staggering. On the split screen of my laptop, Leo's monitor was fully visible. He had the portal for the offshore bank in the Cayman Islands open. The balance on the screen read $4,200,000, all of it stolen from Vance Digital Marketing over the last 2 quarters. All right, David, Leo said, his voice coming coming through my speakers crystal clear. This is the final sequence. Once I input the authorization token from Maya's forged corporate profile, the funds will officially clear out of the Seattle State holding account and settle into the Apex Trust. Tomorrow morning, you hand her the divorce papers, and by noon, her legal team won't even be able to find the jurisdiction this money is sitting in. Do it, David said, a greedy, triumphant grin breaking across his face. I am so sick of playing the doting husband to that woman. 5 years of listening to her talk about our vision and our legacy. I want my life back. I want my money. It's our money, David, Chloe piped up from the sofa, her voice sharp and entitled. Don't forget who provided the distraction. Of course, beautiful, David smiled, looking over at her. I watched Leo's fingers fly across the keyboard, entering the complex alphanumeric string that would finalize the digital theft of my life's work. APEX99XZ. The moment he hit the enter key, a massive bright red dialog box popped up across his screen, completely locking him out of the browser interface. Transaction terminated. Funds frozen by order of the state attorney general. Leo froze. He slammed his hands against the desk, leaning closer to the monitor. What the hell? No, this is a glitch. The state bank just flagged the routing protocol. What do you mean it's flagged? David stood up, his face instantly turning pale. Leo, fix it! I'm trying! The admin override isn't responding! Leo shouted, his fingers hammering the keys frantically. Someone is inside the local bridge. Someone is mirroring my screen from an external IP address. Before Leo could figure out where the breach was coming from, the heavy, reinforced oak front door of his luxury penthouse didn't just open. It was blown off its hinges by a hydraulic breach ram. A team of armed state law enforcement officers, flanked by Detective Miller from the Corporate Fraud Division, swarmed into the room, their weapons drawn. State police! Hands where I can see them. Step away from the computer, the lead officer bellowed. David immediately threw his hands in the air, dropping to his knees, his face twisted in pure, unadulterated terror. Leo stared at the officers, completely paralyzed, his mouth hanging open like a landed fish. Chloe let out a piercing shriek, dropping her phone onto the marble floor. Detective Miller walked calmly past the kneeling David, straight to Leo's laptop. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a secure evidence drive, and plugged it into the USB port, locking down the entire system log before Leo could hit a delete key. She turned around, looking straight at the main security camera mounted on the wall, the camera she knew I was currently watching from my dark mansion miles away. She gave a small, professional nod directly into the lens. We have them. Maya, she said softly, knowing the audio bridge was still live. The game is over. 1 week later, the smart house was completely empty. All of Leo's custom touch screens had been ripped out of the walls, leaving behind neat square openings with raw copper wiring hanging out. The Sentinel was dead. I had hired a traditional local locksmith to install heavy, mechanical, high-security deadbolts on every door. No apps, no networks, no AI, just steel and keys. I sat on the empty kitchen island, sipping a cup of coffee, watching the morning sun break through the Seattle mist. Arthur Pendleton walked into the kitchen, carrying a folder of finalized legal documents. He looked incredibly relieved, a genuine smile replacing the worry he had carried for weeks. The state attorney finalized the indictments this morning. Maya, Arthur said, laying the papers on the counter, because we caught them in the act of executing the transfer using a forged administrative signature. The bail has been set at $2 million each. Neither David nor Leo can afford it. Their personal assets have been completely frozen by the court. And the agency? I asked. Completely secure, Arthur nodded. The court ordered an immediate return of the siphoned $4 million from the state escrow account back into Vance Digital Marketing's operational reserves. You have full 100% control of the firm now. David's shares have been legally forfeited under the corporate fraud statute. What about Chloe? She's singing like a canary, Arthur chuckled softly. To avoid prison time as an accessory, she's given the state attorney a full, detailed statement outlining every meeting David and Leo had at the penthouse over the last 6 months. She's completely destroyed their legal defense before the trial even begins. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling a profound, heavy sense of peace wash over me. The betrayal had been deep, designed to erase me from my own life. But in their arrogance, they had forgotten that a house built on a foundation of lies will always collapse under its own weight. My phone vibrated on the counter. It was a restricted call from the county detention facility. I answered it, putting it on speakerphone. Maya, please? David's voice came through the line, raspy, broken, and completely devoid of the smooth charm he had used to deceive me for 5 years. You have to help me. Leo set me up. He was the one who altered the accounts. I love you, Maya. I never wanted to hurt you. Please tell the DA to drop the corporate charges. We can handle the divorce privately. Goodbye, David, I said, my voice entirely flat, entirely unbreakable. Maya, don't do this. You can't leave me in here. I tapped the red button on the screen, cutting him off mid-sentence. I didn't just hang up. I blocked the facility number entirely. I stood up, walking to the front door of my massive glass mansion. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling the heavy steel door shut behind me, and turned the manual key until I heard the solid, metallic click of the deadbolt sliding into place. I looked up at the empty sky. The air was crisp, clean, and completely mine. The house wasn't a cage anymore, and for the first time in a very long time, I was the only master admin of my own life.